Okay, so picture this. A legendary band that sells a ton of records, features all the biggest stars of the day, and basically defines an entire era of music, but they never, not once, played a live show. It sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're going to unravel the incredible story of one of tango's greatest mysteries, the Orquesta Típica Victor.
Our story starts with a sound that just doesn't quite fit. You think you're listening to a tango, but instead of the sounds of Buenos Aires, you hear this. A song about a heartbroken cowboy and his ox. And yeah, that's the sound of a cart, literally trudging through mud. It's weird, it's beautiful, and it is totally out of place.
So that's our big question, right? What is the deal with the song? Who on earth made it, and why? To figure that out, we have to start peeling back the layers of a really fascinating musical mystery. All right, let's dig in.
So our first piece of the puzzle is the song itself. It's called Huella Bue.
You know, this track is a complete outlier. Tango is almost always about city life, the passion, the drama, the heartbreak happening in crowded dance halls. But this song, Huella Bue, which means ox trail, takes us way out into the countryside. It's a nod to tango's rural roots, for sure, but even then, a song about an ox with sound effects? That was just not done. This isn't just a song, it's a clue that we're dealing with something very, very different here.
So, who is singing about this lonely cowboy? Well, the answer to that question is what connects this weird little country song to the absolute heart of the tango universe.
Huella Bue was actually a duet, sung by Juan Delson and a guy named Roberto Díaz. Now, their partnership, super brief. They only ever recorded 2 songs together. But that second name, Roberto Díaz, he was a giant, a superstar. This was a man who sang on over 80 tracks with all the most famous orchestras of the time. He is our connection, the thread that's going to pull this whole story together. And that connection, it runs deep. I mean, Díaz made 27 recordings with the orchestra behind our mystery song, the Orquesta Típica Victor. Yeah, 27. This wasn't just some random gig for him. He was one of their most important, most featured singers.
And that brings us to the orchestra itself, because this wasn't just any old band. This was a supergroup put together for one very specific reason.
You see, the Orquesta Típica Victor was what's known as a house orchestra. The Victor record label basically built this band from the ground up for one thing and one thing only, to make records. Their entire life was inside the 4 walls of a recording studio. They were like musical ghosts. Everybody knew their music, but nobody had ever seen them play.
And don't get me wrong, this was no simple backup band. It was a revolving door of absolute legends. We're talking about the titans of tango here. Names like Aníbal Troilo, Pedro Lorens, Elvino Vardaro. I mean, the biggest names in the business all cycled through this studio project.
So how did it all begin? Well, the story starts in 1925. The Victor Record Company hires this classically trained pianist, Adolfo Carabelli, and gives him a mission: create the best tango orchestra you can, just for us. So he went out and hired the best musicians money could buy. And just like that, a recording powerhouse was born.
Okay, let's zoom in a little bit now, right back to the time when our mystery song, Huella Bue, was actually made, because this period was a true golden era for the orchestra.
Between 1928 and 1931, the legendary bandoneonist Luis Petrucelli was in charge, and his star singer was our guy, Roberto Díaz. And what's so wild is that before this, the orchestra had already recorded over 100 instrumental tracks. Bringing in a vocalist like Díaz was a huge shift in their sound, and boy, was it popular.
So why do we still talk about this specific period? Because these recordings are pure gold for tango dancers, even today, almost 100 years later. The vocal sets, or tandas, from these years are just beloved for their rhythm, their incredible emotion, and they're just perfect to dance to. This band that never played live created music that has lived on in dance halls all over the world. All right, so let's pull the camera back and look at the big picture. What was the total impact of this incredible, invisible orchestra?
444. And that's just the official count. The real number is probably even higher. Just think about that volume. For almost 20 years, they were this constant, powerful force in recorded tango music. It's absolutely staggering. You know, the orchestra actually lived a pretty long life, evolving through a few different leaders. After Carabelli, Federico Scorticati took over in '36, then Mario Morano in '43, but by 1944, their amazing, almost 2-decade run finally came to an end. And get this, it wasn't all tango. Not by a long shot. Their versatility was just incredible. Sure, tango was their bread and butter, but they also recorded dozens and dozens of waltzes, rancheras, and even foxtrots and polkas. They were like the musical engine for the Victor label, just churning out hits in whatever style was needed.
So why did they stop? Well, the world of tango just changed. By the 1940s, the era of the big touring orchestras, bands led by rock star-like figures like Troilo and D'Arienzo, was in full swing. People didn't just want to hear the music anymore, they wanted to see their idols play live. The whole idea of a studio-only band, no matter how good they were, just started to feel like a relic.
And that leaves us with this really interesting question, doesn't it? The Orquesta Típica Victor never felt the energy of a cheering crowd, never had an encore. But their pristine, perfectly polished recordings have lasted, while maybe some of those live bands have been forgotten. It really makes you think. What's more important to history? The magic of a live performance that disappears the moment it's over, or the timeless perfection of a studio recording?